And European creditors have once again denied Greece an extension of the current bailout. That's according to Finland's finance minister. A new bailout, though, is still a possibility. Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis remains upbeat.
Everything is possible. Remain hopeful.
Well, with just a few hours before Greece's current bailout expires, the cash-strapped country has asked Europe for a new loan. Time is running out for Athens to make a €1.6 billion payment to the International Monetary Fund and avoid default. Our Europe correspondent Peter Oliver joins us now with the very latest, because the clock is very much ticking. Peter, what can you tell us about Greece's 11th hour proposal then?
Right, well, Greece is asking for a new two-year bailout of around €30 billion. That €30 billion, they're saying, is only to cover the costs of the debts that they have outstanding, pay off the debts over the next 2 years. However, any form of extension on the current bailout, well, that was being ruled out immediately by the Eurogroup finance ministers. They met by conference call. We heard from Alexander Stubb, the finance minister of Finland, right off the bat saying no chance, no deal was made tonight. He did hint that we could see a further meeting of the finance ministers take place on Wednesday. Now, we are hearing from the Deputy Prime Minister of Greece, though, that he's asking the International Monetary Fund if there can be a suspension of that 1.6 billion, or around 1.6 billion, that they need to pay to the IMF in just a couple of hours' time. Well, the reason is they simply haven't got it. We're expecting to hear from the IMF around the time that it should have been paid. As it stands at the moment, we're going to hear from them saying we haven't received our money. But when it comes to Greece and its embattled leadership, they're facing more and more pressure. Immediately after leaving the stage in Syntagma Square in Athens, the mayor of the Greek capital, he went straight to media and said that Alexis Tsipras must step down. So he is facing increasing pressure within Greece. Also, it seems pressure coming from abroad as well, as documents that have been leaked to newspapers here in Germany, as well as to The Guardian in the United Kingdom as well, show that even if Greece lived up to all of the proposals that have been put on the table that they'll be voting on in a referendum over the weekend, that the IMF's own documents say that they would face an unsustainable level of debt, even if they did everything right up until 2030. Now, this was given to German MPs in case they needed to vote on a potential bailout extension. Now, that was ruled out by Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor. She said she wouldn't be entering into any discussions or signing off on any type of discussions on that until that referendum has been held. So, as it stands at the moment, we're still counting down the clock until that deadline passes on Greece paying their money to the International Monetary Fund, a whopping sum of 1.6 billion euros that they just haven't got. If we pass that deadline, well, then we're into uncharted waters and we don't know what will come next. What we do know, though, is there will be a referendum on Sunday. There is growing crowds in Athens right now saying that they want to see a yes vote on the referendum. That would see the bailout extensions being approved by the people. But it certainly seems like there's a rocky road ahead for Greece still, and in particular for their current left-wing ruling government, who seem to be taking flak from all sides.
Pete, thank you very much for the update. Peter Oliver monitoring this developing story here on RT International. Well, Greece has been on the verge of bankruptcy for years. It all began in 2009 when its national debt went through the roof, triggering a wave of severe austerity measures and mass protests.
Mr. Varoufakis, is this a sad day for you, Mr. Varoufakis? Greece. Is this a sad day for you? A sad day for Europe.
Well, 2 years ago, the International Monetary Fund admitted that it had failed to realise the damage austerity policies would cause in Greece, but nevertheless decided to continue with the programme. The failures included a deep recession and exceptionally high unemployment. Euroscepticism is also growing in other EU countries faced with austerity measures. We went to Italy and Spain to ask people how they would vote if they were offered the chance to exit the euro.
Por salir del euro. Si un país no funciona con un tipo de moneda, una economía, ¿por qué sigue con ello?
Yo votaría pues que sí que se quedaran en la Unión Europea. Creo que hacen más unidos todos che non por separado.
Non so cosa è meglio, se rimanere nell'euro o tornare indietro, nel senso che con l'euro sicuramente ci siamo avvicinati a molti paesi.
Scegliere di uscire dall'euro in quanto negli ultimi anni abbiamo subito un'inflazione molto alta.
Io ho cambiato idea poco fa, sceglierei di uscire dall'euro e dall'Europa perché credo che questo sistema ormai ha proprio collassato del tutto.
Well, MEP for the UK Independence Party, Nathan Gill, thinks a Grexit would trigger a domino effect in the Eurozone.
The euro is a political project. It certainly isn't an economical project, because if it was, it would have been put out of its misery many years ago. You look at what's actually happened to the people of Greece themselves, where the suicide rate has just gone beyond anything that we can recognise. Behind the scenes, we've got all of the big guns of all of the institutions, the banks which are all involved in this, especially Germany. They do not want Greece to leave because there will be a contagion effect. The Greek economy will start to blossom and boom, like what we saw in Iceland. Don't forget, Iceland was in a situation where they literally were begging to join the European Union, and nobody talks about Iceland anymore because it is the success story of Europe.
Meanwhile, one British shop worker thinks he's got the solution to help Greece pay off its debts. Now, Tom Finney, who's 29 and from London, has launched a crowdfunding campaign to collect the money that Greece needs to pay off this loan to the IMF. Now, you can see how it's going so far. There's the figure. Tom says it works out at about just €3 per EU citizen. That's the equivalent of a feta and olive salad. Only a few hours left, but clearly, as you can see here, still some way to go. Well, people have been turning to Twitter to call for the cancellation of the Greek debt. The hashtag Cancel Greek Debt has been trending. Many are calling for a resounding no to austerity, using the Greek word oxy, which you can see there. Others insist the debt must be forgiven because the country fell victim to market forces and cannot be blamed for the crisis, with some adding the Greek debt should be cancelled for the sake of humanity and democracy. Well, these are the scenes live in Athens, where people have flooded the square outside the Parliament building. Protesters are waving EU flags and calling for a deal with Greece's international creditors. A recent poll found that 57% would agree to the lenders' terms. Well, Greek Minister of Administrative Reforms, George Katrigalos, says the creditors timed their ultimatum to get Athens to cave in.
I think that it was a deliberate strategy on behalf of our partners to use the time and the lack of liquidity of our economy in order to present us an ultimatum at the last moment. And by this way, hoping that we'd have two options, either the submission to their ultimatum or the default. Exactly because we wanted to reverse this ultimatum, we made the decision to go to the people and ask them to say no. Exactly because in the tradition of the European Union, every time that a people has said no through a referendum, his voice has been heard.